Hello, hello. Welcome to Grieving Voices. Today, my guest is Katie Prentiss. She is the mother of four who was running a successful photography business when her mother was diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia, and she became her full-time caregiver. Seeing firsthand how short life truly can be, Katie embarked on a midlife career pivot into acting. Katie's second career began on the fast track by landing the first role she auditioned for in a feature film. Since that amazing opportunity, she added writer, director, and producer to her growing creative resume with the creation of her first award winning short film, Front Porches. Acting has been a life changing occupation for Katie, allowing her to dive more deeply into the stories of others with empathy and understanding. Has written a feature length film called Wake Up Maggie, a coming of age film written as a love letter to caregivers raising dementia awareness. Wake Up Maggie is currently in pre production and is being created by a female led production team and film crew. Katie has been featured on Remember Me, Second Act Actors, and more. Thank you so much for being my guest today
Thank
and
you
for
for having me.
sharing an aspect of grief that hasn't been talked about. I might have had one other guest who spoke on dementia, but not the frontal
Mm,
lobe dementia, which tends
mm,
to my own understanding, just because someone within my community was diagnosed very young in her early 50s.
yeah,
And so I believe it tends to um, develop at a younger age. Is that correct?
that is correct. It is the most common form of dementia under the age of 65.
And so how old was your mom? Well, first of all, let's
Yeah.
um is her what's her is her name? Was her name Maggie?
Maggie
Okay.
Branson. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how old was she when she was diagnosed then?
My mom was 62 when we officially got the diagnosis. The tricky thing with frontotemporal dementia or FTD is that it can often take an average of 3.5 years to get an accurate diagnosis. So often people are showing symptoms like early signs without the family knowing, or without anyone knowing what it is or what's going on. So I look back and think she definitely had symptoms like in her 50s for sure.
Can you share what some of those things that were that you noticed as a family?
Sure. Well, I should say that frontotemporal dementia definitely affects someone's personality. It's less of a memory type of dementia, and it's more of like personality, compulsion control. For my mom in particular, it was speech, like language. She had primary progressive aphasia, so she lost her ability to communicate. But early on, it was my mom definitely had some shifts in personality, but we also had a lot of life stuff happen with her. She had a massive car wreck when I was in college. My parents went through a divorce when right about within those few years. So there was a lot of circumstantial change in her life, and it was easy to rationalize everything we saw as, oh, well, this is just mom now that she lives alone. Like, no one's telling her to like stop obsessively recycling things. you know like my mom would have just recycling containers stacked up really high. She also like was compulsively ordering clothing online, like way more than one person could use. um she was definitely fell victim to like some scams, um like she signed up for like a phone and alarm system in her home. She definitely like had someone call her saying that they wanted to marry her, and she fell into this like scam relationship where she sent someone money. But the biggest clue for us was that she started having delusions, and at first the delusions felt somewhat based in reality, like very explainable for us. Like, so she said, "Oh, there is a man and his son in my backyard." And I'm like, "Well, who?" But in your rational mind, you're thinking, "Oh, there's probably like a child that got away from their parents or something, and they just went in the backyard and then left." But the delusion started getting more extreme and less realistic. So we knew that something was up at that point.
And you're also a mother of four.
Yeah.
So, I'm also curious if you have siblings because I know you became her caregiver.
Hmm.
But were your children young? How did you
Yeah.
balance all that?
Yeah, it was a journey. So I am the middle child of three. I have an older brother and a younger sister, and they're both wonderful humans, like involved. And my family all lived in Georgia at this point, and my personal family was living in Oregon, and we still are. Um, when this was going on, again, like there were signs and things going on with mom that we'd be like, that's crazy. Like she got lost going home. That's wild. Um, but then once her delusions or her visions of things that she saw or felt were happening became more crazy. Like she gave a story about a man and a woman who climbed up onto her roof and dug a hole in her roof. Like she really believed they were like going into her attic through her roof. And it was so sad because I thought like, oh, it just sounds like she's scared to live alone. Like she thinks like everyone's coming to her house. But anyways, at that point, I talked to my sister and I said, I feel like maybe something's wrong with her meds or like something's off. Like she's just sharing some crazy stories. And we decided, my sister took her to a psychiatrist to see if there was something, some sort of answer they could give us. And the psychiatrist appointment, they basically said, okay, your mom has a delusional disorder. She cannot drive and she cannot live alone, like starting now. And so we were just like, wait, what? All of us had young kids at this point, in our 30s. So my sister being closer in location to my mom, I mean, we were both like, well, she can come live with us. It's great. Like in a way, it was like, well, mom's really helpful to have around. And, she's the grandma and like it is kind of nice to have an extra set of adult hands. And so, um, my sister and I kind of joked about like, I'll take her. No, I'll take her. And then she ended up moving in with my sister and her family. And this was like late fall of that year. And my I remember saying to my sister, like, let's just get through the holidays, like just have mom for an extended visit through the holidays, and then we can talk about what we want to do like in a more permanent way. But they settled in with mom. She lived there almost 3 years with them. If I do the math right, I think it was right around three. And as she was living there, her symptoms and disease was progressing, and she was getting more tricky to manage. Um, I wasn't, in the weeds with them. They were handling so much stuff, like, moving her out of her house, selling her house eventually, like all of those logistics of caring for someone. And then they got to their end of feeling able to maintain her care needs. And at that point, I felt like I can't tolerate having my mom go into a nursing home in Georgia, like across the country from me. So I felt like I wanted her to come live with us, and talked with my husband, and we made the decision to move her out to Oregon. And so mom lived here, her last 2.5, almost 3 years of her life with us. So she lived with us in our home for about less than a year, and then we had to put her into a nursing home and then a memory care home to be able to handle her needs because it was so advanced. So it was a journey. It was a long journey of trying to figure out how to care for her well in those years.
I think that's probably, I mean, I've just seen it. And
Mm.
so I worked in a nursing home that had a
Ah,
memory care,
ah,
f- you know, uh, section. Um, but it is, and it can be a very long disease.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think that is probably would you say that create one of the aspects of it that creates a lot of complicated feelings?
absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's like you're mourning your person that's right in front of you. It's like you're not you know that they're on their decline and that death is going to come for them through this it's usually secondary causes through this disease, which is super frustrating. Um, but it's all I almost felt I remember feeling really afraid of how long mom might live with this because you start to project out and envision the future and it's this like rapid decline of them losing well for us it was all her personality, all her ability to talk. She became like the only way I can describe it is like it would be like a severely autistic person, where the ability to communicate is just gone and you're like, know that they're in there, but you
Mm.
want to be able to reach in and have some sort of semblance of interaction with them. Found myself envious of people with Alzheimer's because I thought, yeah, they're repeating their story and they don't remember you, but like at least they can talk to you. Like I felt like I just would have given anything to talk to her, to just like hear her say something or tell me the same story or, let's have that conversation about who I am. Not to like diminish anyone else's suffering or pain with that, but it is very complicated. It's complicated in that you don't want it to last a really long time. It's complicated that you feel like you're grieving them while they're still there in front of you. Um, I know I called it the slow goodbye. I know people call it the long goodbye. um, but yeah, yeah, it's just a difficult walk for sure.
How did you explain this to your kids?
Mm. Hmm. Um,
I mean, because you're a caregiver to children too,
yeah,
managing their emotions
yeah,
and bringing a parent into the home, I'm imagine has a different impact on your marriage too. And so it's
absolutely.
a lot of layers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our kids, I would say, I'm trying to remember exactly how old they were. I think our oldest was like maybe just started middle school, and then our youngest was in kindergarten, first grade. I can't remember. And I would say for the youngest, it was like easy because I found him to be the easiest to bring around mom because he would just hug her and, bop away and then come back and hug her again. And it's just like how children can be so present in what is and not, given to like the fear or the imagination of what could be.
Mhm.
And then the older we get, the more we live in those spaces of not being present and, constantly fearing the worst and stuff. But my older kids, I mean, it's funny because I think I was in such crisis management mode. I don't know if I did a very good job of explaining anything to them, but I was trying to do my best to model love and care and acceptance. Like, this is what we do. We take care of family. We love the person in front of us, even though they're difficult. But I probably was naive in what I assumed they were absorbing. It's so easy to assume kids aren't absorbing as much, and they always are. They're so much smarter than we give them credit for. Um, Mr. Rogers was so good at that, right? Like acknowledging that in children. But I remember my kids would have like writing assignments and they'd bring them home and it would be like a poem and it would be about my mom, about Mamie living with us. And I thought, oh my gosh, wow, they're so deeply processing. Um, so I think that I definitely felt my children's attention and care toward me as their mom, watching me, like, be in this grief, and we just did our very best to, like, support mom, but also, like, give our family time and nurture, and that was the hardest challenge is, like, doing both, like, having just our family time and not feeling guilty about that, and then also trying to take care of mom, so it was a lot, like, having her in our home. Her needs were really even in the very beginning of her moving in, her needs were probably more advanced than what we could handle, and we tried. So,
What did you learn about grief or know about grief? I mean, because you had experienced your parents' divorce,
mhm,
and but had grief been a topic that was talked about
mm,
um, growing up, and how do you feel how how do you feel this experience has changed how you look at grief now and
mm,
how you parent?
mm. Yeah, I grief, wow. I don't know. I definitely had a taste of grief with the divorce for sure. That's such I remember just feeling like, wow, that really, like, shifted my identity in a way that, like, it's like everything I've known myself to be and known myself to be a part of now feels, like, fragmented. And even in that, I noticed, like, oh, people who have been through it get it, um, and know that it's hard, whereas, grief is so tricky, like, when you haven't experienced a like grief, it's harder to enter in with people's suffering or pain or hold space for that because you just feel like I think especially okay, going back to the divorce, I think it's such commonplace almost in our culture that people are like, "Oh, sorry." It's
Mhm.
kind of like, um, "Oh, that's hard. Okay, sorry." And whereas I was like processing this whole like identity and how do I deal with all of this stuff. I think the thing with mom, oof, I that was the most obviously, it's the most profound grief I've ever been through in my life. I think when I was in it, I felt very isolated from people really understanding what it was like because so like we even talked about earlier in this podcast, I think so many people understand Alzheimer's or some type of dementia, but I felt so young and so confused by mom's behaviors and the way she was exhibiting symptoms. And I felt misunderstood in a lot of ways. And I remember periodically I would post something on social media and share like a couple sentences about um like losing her as a person and dementia sucks, and then I would find someone whose loved one also had FTD or whose person who were going through something similar, and I remember feeling like, wow, why does this feel so helpful even though it changes nothing? It just feels so helpful to know that you're actually not alone in the exact scenario you're in. So I learned that in those moments, I learned that sharing our story is incredibly powerful and that even though we can feel so isolated and alone, um, that can really help with some of those feelings. And then obviously with the grief, like the deeper grief of her actual death and that loss, I learned so much. I learned that we all experience our grief so differently from each other. And I think the really interesting thing is that even in a sibling group, or even when you're grieving the exact same person that you feel like in a very similar or same ish way, you will process it differently. And I notice very early on that sometimes the people you think you'll be able to have like intimacy and grieving with, you might not be able to have that. And I also notice how easy it is to compare your grief to other people. and vice versa, and how unhelpful that is. Like, so if someone's sobbing and you feel like stone cold, like dried up, it's easy for one to think the other is silly or whatever, but it's not helpful. Um, so that was those lessons were incredibly profound in the early stages of losing mom, of like, oh, we're all going to do this differently. It does nothing to compare, does nothing to serve us to compare or contrast. And um, you may not be able to share your grief with people who you think you might be able to share your grief with. The other thing that I realize that I think a lot of people probably know who've experienced grief is that it shows up when it wants to show up. It's an uninvited guest. I'm always like, this is now my lifelong companion. Don't really want to walk with her, but I will be. And it's something that I just have to let like show up and move through. And yeah, and just it does change through the years, but it's not that loss is always there. The loss of a person that you love, or the loss of a dream that you had, or um yeah, that loss of future that you expected. It's like always going to be there. Um so and I'm still learning. I think the other lesson, now I'm like 8 years out of losing my mom, and I always I think a lot about how it doesn't have to end with grief. Like, grief doesn't get to have the final word. And that's the other thing I've learned is like, yes, the impact is profound. It might stop you in your tracks. You might have to spend a lot of years, like what I call cocooning, like cocoon and heal and contract and like take that comfort and space however you can survive, but know that it doesn't have to be the final say, that, like, the clouds can lift, and I always say the sun is always shining above the clouds. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. And that brings me so much comfort, just knowing, like, I might be, like, walking around in just gray clouds, feeling so thick, like I'll never see anything else besides that, but the sun is shining. And if you've ever taken a flight, you know what that feels like to fly through the clouds, and then it's glorious, right? It's like the sky is just lit up, or, maybe you get a sunrise or a sunset in there, or see other beautiful things, but like that's existing all the time on a different plane and is accessible to us, at least in our minds.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
What was the thing, do you think, that helped you the most um, to create a forward momentum of healing?
Mm. I think for me, I think that the loss, losing mom at a young age made me realize the contrast is like, yes, death can happen at any time. We don't know, like we can't predict our future. And that makes me want to like live. I think there's really like it doesn't serve anyone else. It doesn't serve anyone for us to just curl up in a ball and be dead ourselves. And so for me, it's like, well, okay, now I know so profoundly that life is short, and I want to like live big. I want to live as big as I can and love as big as I can. And I feel like just that thought alone helps me. Just like I think it's probably inevitable to compare your life to like, especially when you lose a parent. When you lose a parent at a certain age, you start thinking like, well, that's what's going to happen to me. Um, so it's easy for me to be like, "Oh, 62, 62," like, in my mind. I only have till 62, and that is really, like, not a lot of time. And so, even though I don't wanna believe that or predict that for myself, comes in, and then I have to say, okay, well, what if it was true? Like, what would you do? And I'm like, let's go. Let's go do some things that make me feel alive. And so I actually use that as a barometer a lot. It's like, what makes me feel really alive? And it's not comfort food and TV and social media scrolling and all the things I do all the time. I'm not judging any of those things, but those don't make me feel really alive. Those things make me feel more numb. What makes me feel more alive is truly connecting with people, is taking risks, is doing something new, um, getting out of my comfort zone. Uh, so when I say I really want to be alive, I use that as a measure. Well, what makes me feel alive? Oh, like learning a different style of dance, even though I'm not good at dancing. Like I'm like, that's so fun. So I try to do those things. And my kids are now at the age where they're graduating from high school and heading to college, et cetera. And I think like that even more so, that's a different kind of grief in and of
Mhm.
itself, of like identity and family dynamic shift and whatnot. But I think about that a lot too. I'm like, okay, they're going out to have their adventure and I can too. Like this is we're getting some time back in our lives. And so I don't want to just waste that away. I want to do things that, yeah, that feel like, yeah, I don't want to just settle and like move into like a comfort zone. I want to move into like something new and have an adventure. So,
And be reminded that you are alive, right?
yes, exactly. Exactly.
I lost my dad, he was 44.
Oh,
And so that's one thing people don't really talk about, right? Is you wait for that year to come around, like, oh,
yes.
I've made it past my dad's age now. Okay, well,
Yeah.
phew, I can
Yeah.
cross that off the list, you know? So that's something people really don't talk about.
Mm,
One thing I'm curious too, because I've had this awareness just for myself in the last year or so, is that I could never, I never had my dad's birthday on my calendar, but I
mm.
always had the day he died.
Wow.
Were you the same, or like,
I,
like I could never celebrate the day of his birth, right? Which seems really,
mm,
I was 8 when he passed, so I didn't have
uh,
him a very long time, right? But I don't even remember. I think there's a picture of it was his birthday one time, but
mhm.
um yeah, I just think people don't really talk about that part of
Yeah.
dates.
I
Some
can see as an 8-year-old and only having experienced him for those years, how his death date would be way more profound for you
Mhm.
than his birth date. Just thinking about that, like I'm thinking, yeah, I can't imagine as an 8-year-old processing that. And then every year, like feeling the impact of that in such a profound way. It doesn't surprise me that that would be your experience. I think that for me, my mom was like such a birthday celebrator. And I'm like such a birthday. It's like I'm a little spazzy about it. I just love celebrating birthdays. I tease about having a birthday month and I'm a little bit of a diva about it. And I love celebrating my kids' birthdays. I've created little monsters with them about birthdays. So I think because of that, it's easy for me to like gravitate towards my mom's birthday and want to do things for her then. There was a year in there where I was like, oh, like her day of death like passed without me even noticing.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, weird. I almost felt bad for not thinking about it. But I was like, well, it's fine, like that's anyway. Yeah, I do think that it's something I thought about as far as like the catching up with your parents' age. My dad lost his father when he was 21. So my dad was 21 when his dad died. And I've definitely watched him go, oh, I'm getting to the age. I can't remember how old his dad was, but he definitely had that in his mind. And I watched him contemplate that. And then for me, it was just a really profound reality of like, oh, okay, like, oh no, mom, my mom, started her decline in her 50s. That's not good. And then she died when she was 68, diagnosed when she was 62. So I'm like, that's not good. But even, I don't know, I just think it's kind of, I don't know how it feels for you, but like I almost feel like watching someone die is a little bit like experiencing a car accident, and how that like just like imprints on your body, like it imprints in your memory and in your DNA in a way or something. This is all science based. But like I think like the way you viscerally feel a car wreck, even when you like, sometimes even just saying car wreck, like we can put ourselves back in that space and time so quickly. I think that watching someone's decline and death, it's not as shocking. But if you are able to see someone's process or decline, then definitely imprints in a way. Um, there's a knowing that happens that you can't know any other way.
Has it made you paranoid about your own health?
So yes, so part of my journey, especially in my filmmaking career at this point, is to raise awareness around FTD, caregiving, like this whole thing. But one of the things I realized in the moment when we got mom's diagnosis of FTD, I just heard dementia. And I heard dementia and I was like, okay, it's some type of dementia and it's in her frontotemporal lobes. So those lobes are like this part of us. And I kind of I think that I was in so much crisis that I couldn't even tolerate researching and finding more information. It felt like it would really stress me out even more. It was more like survival, survival. Um, since then, lost my mom in 2016. I made my first film in 2020, which was also about dementia, like those early signs of dementia. And in that process, like got connected with FTD community and more people in this world, and started learning more just in my own journey in healing and stuff. And one of the things I learned was that FTD can be genetic. There can be like a genetic strain, like ALS or Huntington's or one of those things. So that doesn't feel really good in a in a child's mind of someone with dementia or with FTD. But so I realized there's a genetic component, and I still was like, okay, but I can like deny this away. I can make sure, oh, well, mom had the car wreck and all these other things. So it's probably related to that and not really related to any kind of genetics. But then a number of years ago, her younger brother got diagnosed with FTD. Um, so that was like a heart stop for me. And there is testing available, which I could partake in. I don't know if we have, I don't know. I haven't done the research on how that works or what we need to be able to find out. And it is something I want to explore just to even contribute to research. Even if I don't find out whether I have it or not, it would contribute to the research of FTD, which is important to me. But all of that to say, is I'm on this journey. I'm making my first feature film. It is to raise awareness on caregiving and dementias in general, but specifically a diagnosis with FTD. And as I'm writing the film, like preparing, I just feel like there's this like fear monster over my shoulder. Like, you have it. You probably have it. Every time I stumble on my words or like my handwriting gets wonky or whatever, I think, oh my God, like this is early signs. Like I probably have it. So that fear is palpable. Like it's in my life. It's present. It's attached to the grief. It's attached to the work that I'm doing currently in my life. I was working and moving through it, just feeling like, it's over there. I'm like, just wanting to shoo it away, like, go away, go away. And then I stop for a second and I think, um, I'm like, okay, instead of trying to ignore this and act as if it's not here with me, what if I face it? And so I had this moment where I thought, I need to just turn around and look it in the face. And so for me, that means instead of like being afraid of it, why don't I just embrace it as if it is? And, fear is just our imagination, and we can use it for our good and we can use it for our demise. And I feel like for me, this is how it sounded. Okay, instead of like always being afraid every time little flubs happen or whatever, I'm going to say, what if I knew for sure that I had FTD? What if I knew for sure that I am going to have this thing? It's coming. This is the way my life is going to end. What would you do? And and asking myself that just gives so much clarity because I realize even if I knew I had it, I would have to move into acceptance, just like we have to with our grief at some point. Why not do it now and think about this? Like, if I had FTD, I would live my life as fully as possible. I would love my family and my friends. I would try to stay present with them. I would try to pursue the healthiest life that I could. Obviously, like we're all going to sit on the couch and eat a bag of chips or whatever, but it's like I would choose healthy food. I would choose outdoor time. I would choose friend time, being present with people. And the other really point of clarity for me was, and I would make this movie. And this movie would be like my contribution. And so asking that question and facing that fear monster face dead on was such a moment of clarity for me in that I know I'm doing what I want to be doing with my life. I'm being very intentional. And now this movie is not just a good idea or something really fun and cool that I get to try to do, but it now is my mission. And and the greatest part about that is I think 1000% I'm going to make this movie and it's going to impact people in these spaces no matter what. Like no matter what. My hope is that it's going to just soar to the to outer space with success. And my dream is that it'll be my first of many movies, that I have all these other movies that I get to make. I have some really amazing stories already in my mind that I cannot wait to get on paper and then on the camera and etc. But no matter what, I'm going to make this one. And if I got FTD and that was the only movie I got to make, so be it. Like this is a great one to choose. And probably I won't die that way and something else will happen and I'll get to make a whole bunch of other movies, but it just gave me so much peace just to like assume that it was rather than fear that it might be. And that peace allowed me to have clarity with knowing that I'm doing what I want to be doing with my time and my life. So that question is so huge for me of like, what if I got it? And answering that straight on was really helpful.
It's a powerful reframe.
Mm.
And then there's probably a camp of people like, no, you're like manifesting it.
I know, I know. People are like, "Don't say that," but I think I agree. I do agree, like, that can, like, the way we imagine and spend our time and our energy and our minds thinking is impactful to our lives, but I also have to be compassionate towards myself and be like, "Of course you're afraid of this, like, it was the most traumatizing thing you've ever been through." So, like, we can't have these fears, have this grief, and then also make ourselves feel terrible for being afraid of it, with the manifestation camp. I mean, I love manifesting things and like spending my energy for good, but I also have to be honest about what I'm
And here's the
feeling.
thing about that too, as I was thinking about as I said that, the other aspect of it, is yes, there might be people who think you're manifesting it, but it's not like you're dwelling on the fact that I have this. It's you're dwelling on the fact that if this is a possibility, I'm going to take action. So it's almost like it's you're reverse engineering it, and your focus isn't on the dwelling
Yeah.
that this is, oh my gosh, this is going to happen to me. It's, oh my gosh, if this were true, it's propelling you to take action,
Yeah.
inspired action.
Right. Thank
How
you.
has it changed? Has this movie changed like, do you have support from your family? Has this whole experience brought you closer with your siblings?
Yes.
How has
Yeah.
things shifted?
It's been phenomenal. So here's where we are right now at the recording time of this podcast. I've spent like years writing this script. I've spent the full last year fundraising and growing support for the film. We're fiscally sponsored and under a nonprofit for our filmmaking, which is just such a it's something I'm really thankful and proud of. The support has been phenomenal. And when I start thinking about it, I like get emotional. I have so much gratitude. I'm doing something that really scares me. Like this film feels like a really big deal. It's a big endeavor to do what I'm trying to do with like I'm acting and directing and producing this thing. And I know it's like taking a big old bite out of the filmmaking world. Um, But from the get-go, the amount of support and people that have rallied to see this film come to fruition has truly been phenomenal. And you asked about my siblings, and one of the ideas I had in this fundraising journey, and I think of it as more than fundraising. It's not just getting money for the film, it's also growing an audience and growing a community around this that really what my hope is the more people that follow along and join us as we're creating this thing that then we'll get to like launch screenings in theaters around the country and like people will be able to come out and watch. Um, but one of my ideas was what if we did some happy hours in different places that I've lived and like have people host parties and we can share about the movie and gather our community. And of course, one of those people was my sister in Georgia. And I was like, hey, what do you think about hosting one of these? And she's so good at hosting parties. She's amazing. She's like, I'm in. Let's go. Let's do this. And then my brother has a band that he plays in called Holy Smokes. And they do cover music, and their band donated their time. And we had this big old party. And it was just such a meaningful event to join with my brother and sister and feel so supported about us taking this journey and like them supporting just the creating of Wake Up Maggie was just phenomenal. But it's been it's so touching. Like I have people who have donated like $10 and people who have donated like $35,000. So it's to me, money is energy and time. And it's all like coming from the same bucket. And so I don't get super fixated on the money. I really love to fixate on the energy and like what are we growing and what are we building and what are we doing? It's more of a movement. So I have been absolutely floored by oh, by the people that come along and say, okay, let's get this movie made. Like, how can I support you? What are we going to do? Let's go. And I'm just going to say, like, it's so many women that have done that for me. And I'm like, women are so powerful. It's just amazing. It's not all women, but like, it's just, yeah, I think this is a film. I call it a coming of middle age film, which I personally love because we have so many coming of age films of like, the transition of teenagers, and I love that genre. But I feel like um there's a different transition, a different like a second puberty of sorts that happen in our midlife. And I think that if we let it affect us, it can change us for so much good. And so much of it is centered on grief. So much of it is, I think sometimes people in their 20s have gone through midlife because they face something deep and profound in their life. And it's like a grief that impacts them to the point where they say, okay, I'm going to like have this perspective on life and what I want to do and know how I want to live. Um, that's what midlife is to me. It's this unraveling of pretense and like coming into our own and like feeling more solid in our life and our humanity. And that's something huge to celebrate. And I think getting to see it on the big screen is going to be a really profound experience for all of us. And I can't wait for everyone to see it.
Well, I definitely will put the link in the show notes to,
Please.
yeah,
Yes.
to your page for people to support your mission and your cause.
Thank you.
Um, how would you describe the Katie you were before your mother's illness and the
Hmm.
Katie sitting before me now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So much of my journey um, definitely is integral with acting. So I started acting after I lost my mom. And I would say before I lost my mom, I was a heavy people pleaser. Um, Lots of personal denial, lots of ignoring of my own needs, ignoring of myself, body awareness, like all that was just like not really a part of my life. And then the healing journey along walking parallel in my healing journey with grief, and then also um, deepening acting. I feel like my journey with acting has helped me become more fully human. It's helped me to acknowledge and deal with like emotions that I often would want to pretend don't exist inside me. Um, it's helped me to connect my mind with my body and my nervous system in a deep way. Like, oh, I actually need to notice when I'm like, I can look really calm on the outside. I can tend to be like a more, people often say, oh, you're so quiet and soothing. And I'm like, that's funny. um, because if you're feeling like this spinning or churning inside,
Feel like a horse in a horse race.
right? It's just
Mhm.
this like, yes, you feel that inside. And I think my journey with acting has helped me to say, oh, that's happening right now. And like, what can I do to support myself? And what can I do to support my nervous system? And how can I experience what I'm experiencing, but also like not let it stop me in my tracks. Um, so it's been so profound. It's been so profound. I think like coming to acceptance with my mom's disease, coming to acceptance with my mom's death, and then moving into a life that I just want to be so intentional and present, um, and just filled with gratitude. It's like, yeah, it does feel like an unraveling. I think Brene Brown has a quote that I love that she talks about midlife isn't a crisis because a crisis is one event. Midlife is more of an unraveling. And I think we think of the word like being unraveled as like a negative thing, like someone's frazzled or something. But
Mhm.
but I feel it as like peeling back. For me, it's been a peeling back of the layers that no longer serve me, the layers that I hid behind and coming into my own space and place in this world and like owning who I am without trying to constantly please and put everyone else first and like their opinions first. So I think it's also been a journey of exposing myself in that way too, of like people pleasers can often blend in so well. And then acting and filmmaking is like one of the most public art forms you could possibly
Mhm.
choose. And so it does a number on me because I think, oh no, everyone's blah 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 blah, and I'm like, no, they're not. They're completely preoccupied with themselves. But I think just just doing that type of exposure helps me like care less about my imagination towards what other people might be thinking. Um, so yeah, so I feel like I am obviously, I think we have these core parts of us that are always true to who we are. But I think what's happened is for me in this process of losing mom and moving forward with my life is that um, I'm more raw and more real and less hidden in it.
I think we almost get, as we allow ourselves to be cracked open and
Yeah.
expose ourselves and do things um, out of our comfort zones and challenge ourselves, we become more like children, right? Uninhibited
Mm,
children. And we get back to, I think, that childlike
mm,
essence within us that we stuffed away and put away
yes.
because it's not acceptable or what
Yes.
have you. And creative expression is foo-foo, and it's like a luxury. And what I've learned in all of these interviews I've done in over 4 years and my own experience is that when you lean into creative expression, um, and out of your comfort zone, doing things out of your comfort zone, that's when you really discover who you were always meant to be, I think.
Yes. I love that. Yeah. It really is coming into a sense of play. And
Mm-hmm.
you can't play unless you're like really present.
Mm-hmm.
And our adult minds love to like fixate on the past or the future and not like right now. So I love that you're saying that. Yeah.
Well, and using the past as your creative fuel, right? So it is
Mm.
looking at it. You're
Mm-hmm.
having to look at it. It's not a
Mm.
stuffing and a tucking away, just like and that's what we do with our grief. And I think that's what so many grievers find themselves stuck in midlife is that they haven't allowed themselves to fully express themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I totally get what you're saying about looking at it. I think that writing, even though I'm writing fiction and I'm writing this script and this story, it's not my story, but it is so much of my story that it has been a really healing journey of it's like exploring the past and what happened, but also in a playful way of storytelling. Yeah,
Mhm. Is there anything else that you would like to share that you didn't feel you got to?
that's a nice question. I feel really good. I just yeah, I love what you're doing in the world and that you're helping grievers feel heard and seen and understood. And I think it's such an important thing for all of us because so often grief hits and we've not ever thought about it until we're in it. Um, I think if I could just leave people with anything, it's just the imagery of the sun shining above the clouds. Think if nothing else, if you just close your eyes and know that what you feel isn't the only truth of existence right now. Um, it's okay to feel it, and it's also really helpful to know that there's like light and warmth above that you will access.
Beautiful words.
Thank you.
And where can people reach you if they would like to learn more about you, Wake Up Maggie, your work, all of that? Where can they connect with you?
Thank you for asking that. I try to make it as easy as possible. All of my social media is Katie Prentiss, so pretty easy to find. My website is katieprentiss.com. And Wake Up Maggie is all under Wake Up Maggie Movie, wakeupmaggiemovie.com, and on Facebook and Instagram as Wake Up Maggie Movie. So we'd love for you to follow along and be a part of our journey. So try to share it all.
Do you have a goal date?
Yes, we're filming in February of this
Oh,
of 2025. Yeah.
oh, awesome.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
So we're right in the middle of working so hard to get everything ready for filming. So we're in pre-production right now. And then we'll shoot for about 3 weeks in February, and then we'll be in post-production, which is all the editing and sound and all the design work that happens on the backside of shooting the film. So it I don't know exactly when will be released, but this is why it's so good for you to follow us on social media or come to our website. We even have an email list you can sign up for, and we'll keep you posted that way. We really love for people to join us and be a part of it. So then when we do screen in theaters, hopefully we can have everyone come out.
I'm just curious. Do you
Yeah.
have like are you like one of those people with numbers, like numbers are important, or do you have like a specific date, like, your mom's birthday maybe, um
Oh,
something like that, where you plan to, even if it's done, you're not going to launch until,
oh, I
something
love
like
that.
that, or you
I
have it
haven't
really.
thought about that with mom. I will say I lost mom. We lost her on February 12th, 2016, and we're shooting in February, which is interesting to me. And then I definitely tossed her birth date into the film as a birth date of one of the characters. Obviously it's called Wake Up Maggie after her, but I haven't thought about the release date. That would be really special if it was on some sort of special date, but I haven't thought about that.
Okay, I was just
Yeah.
curious.
Yeah.
But it'll be really special, I'm sure, and
Thank you.
amazing way to honor your mom and her memory, uh,
Mm.
filming in February. So it's
Yeah.
beautiful how that worked
Thank
out.
you. Yes, I agree.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you sharing your story and your mission, and being a part of my mission to talk about
Yeah.
grief like we talk about the weather, and it's not all doom and gloom, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. No, thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be with you and all of your listeners and just to be able to share my story as a gift. So thank you.
Thank you. And
Mm.
remember, when you unleash your heart, you unleash your life. Much love.